Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, whoever's out there. Welcome to the Common Sense with Conn radio call-in talk show on KTEM 1400 on your AM dial. And the phone number to call in case you want to make a comment is 254-773-1400. Y'all feel free to call in if you got something you want to talk about. Now, if that number don't work for you, we got another number you can call in, and that number is 254-771-2456. That's 771-2456. So y'all feel free to call in, and I just asked you to not be vulgar, not be rude, not be crude, stuff like that. I really do enjoy this show because I really do enjoy having a good, decent conversation with good people. I guess we've already got a call here from Raymond. Raymond, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Go ahead on.
Yeah, thank you for accepting my call, Mr. Tatum. I was just going to ask you, I have all kinds of different opinions on what I saw, but I just wanted to see what your opinion might be. When they had that funeral of President Bush, and they had all those presidents, ex-presidents sitting all up there in the front, and when Donald Trump come walking through there, I was just curious, Jimmy Carter, that's way before his time, he didn't bother to shake Jimmy Carter's hand or, I know the deal between Clinton and him, but, even though that they were all sitting there, I look at the presidency seat as a seat of respect, no matter what type of issue somebody had with somebody at one time or Democratic, Republic, whatever, the president's seat is a seat of respect. And how many times do you usually see all presidents all sitting all together, ex-presidents? And I was just kind of curious, do you think maybe that action that he took for whatever reason he had might affect his re-election term when it comes to be? You have a good day, Mr. Conn, and thank you for accepting my call. God bless you, sir.
Well, Raymond, we always appreciate your call, and you bring up a good subject. When you shake hands with Donald Trump, seeing how he represents the United States of America, aren't you paying respect to the United States? Or are you so hung up on who and what he is that you refuse to shake hands? Don Lennon on CNN made the comment that he would not shake hands with Donald Trump. What kind of a statement is that? What kind of an attitude is that for someone on CNN to say to the listening audience, I hate him so much that I wouldn't shake hands with him? What kind of an attitude is that? He is the president of the United States, and this is where we live. We live in the United States. If we don't respect the president, I guess we don't respect the country. And I don't understand that. Raymond, I would shake hands with President Trump for several reasons. One is I kind of like what he's doing to our country. The other is I respect the president of and the Republic of the United States of America. So I don't understand these folks that are so petty and so small that they don't want to shake hands. I heard that Hillary Clinton kind of turned away from him and didn't want to shake his hand. But, it's a free country. They can do what they want to, but I just think that respect, loyalty, morality, all those things are falling by the wayside. And it's one of the subjects I want to talk about today is what kind of future generations are we raising to take over the leadership in this country and live in this country? What kind of generations are we raising now? And I think that we need to think about that and discuss it and let's see what people think. Uh, I think the question of the day today ought to be, are we breeding and raising lazy, inconsiderate, anti-moral, anti-tradition value generations? Is that what we're producing today in this country? I have just noticed a dramatic increase in lazy, immoral, disrespectful people. Look at Antifa. Look at what they're doing in our country. And not just Antifa, there's other groups also. Groups that are so anti-Constitution, anti-freedom, anti-Second Amendment, anti-First Amendment, anti-Fifth Amendment, anti-everything. Is there a spreading disease called Destroy America? Is that something that is spreading? Now, I might add that Tina is not with us today, so I drafted our board operator. And he's a very good board operator and a very good help on this show. And I have invited him to comment on subjects that he feels the need to comment on. And I would like for him to, especially because he is not just younger than I am, he is much, much younger than I am. And I think it's good to have varying opinions of current events. I have an opinion, and as many people know, I'm opinionated, if that's what you want to call me. But I've said in the past, I wouldn't give a quarter for somebody that don't have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion about things, what are you? So yeah, I have an opinion, and I don't apologize for that. But I also recognize the fact that there are other, especially younger people, their opinions are much, much different than mine, and they're much different than my generation. Now, we did have a caller that called in several months ago or several weeks ago. He made the statement that racism will never be cured in this country until all of the baby boomers are dead. In other words, that's people in my generation, and even some people younger than I am. So it kind of reminds me of an old movie called Soylent Green. Had Charleston Heston in it. And what that movie was about was when people got older, they would go down, they'd lay down on a bed in a room with some real nice music, real relaxing, and then they would zap them with something that killed them. And then they would take the body and turn it into food that they fed the other people. I remember that movie because there are people today that really think that older people should just go away. And I think that opinion might be spreading. For example, you're now hearing from the universities and the colleges a lot of criticism of white men and masculinity and things like that. They promote the idea of more and more girly men and less masculine men. So where does this take us as a country? When all of the masculine type men are gone, who's going to defend the weak? Who's going to defend the country? Who's going to defend the helpless that can't defend themselves? I don't want to live in a world where people are so weak, so timid, so whatever you want to call it, that they will not stand up and defend the weak, the flag, the national anthem, the freedom and the liberty that we enjoy in this country. What will happen to that freedom when there's no one left to defend it? When we have destroyed manhood masculinity, things like that, who's going to defend our freedom? Who's going to defend our way of life? Who's going to defend our traditional values? Who will set the examples? Look at the example now being set by Hollywood. You know, I come from a generation when you did not curse in front of women. There was a lot of language you did not use in front of women or in public. In fact, it used to be against the law in the state of Texas to curse in public. They could come and arrest you for using foul language out in public, like in a restaurant. I don't know if that's still the law or not, but it used to be the law in the state of Texas. But now you turn the TV on and you got some Hollywood jerk using the F word and the MF word and every other kind of vulgar word you can hear. You got a preacher saying not God bless America, but GD America. Well, as those examples spread, what is happening to our traditional values? What's happening to our morality? What's happening to our way of life? And if we destroy the masculinity of males, who will be left to defend our way of life? And that includes our Judeo-Christian values. Recently, they took a poll of millennials, the age group from 22 to 36, and I think I'm correct when they found that 60% of millennials believe that Barack Obama did more for America than George Washington did. By what stretch of the imagination can you believe that? How do you defend that belief, that way of thinking? George Washington was one of the founding fathers that gave us this nation, gave us this freedom, provided this opportunity that we all live under today. Are you so impressed with Barack Obama, especially his skin color? And I might add that I have some very, very dear friends that are black. But did we elect Barack Obama because of his skin color? And do we now think he is the greatest thing since the good Lord? What kind of thinking is that? What kind of a brain produces the thought that Barack Obama did more for this country than George Washington? I don't understand that line of thinking. But it's increasingly, I don't understand how people's brain works. I really don't. I guess I am so fortunate that I am as old as I am, and that I have been exposed to some of the learned, smart, brilliant, good people that I have been privileged to meet in my lifetime. One good man that I met when I was in my early 20s, his name was A.K. Cutler in Bryan, Texas. He asked me one day, he said, "Conn, what's the most valuable, what is the hardest thing in the world to find?" I said, "Well, Mr. Cutler, I guess diamonds or gold or silver." He said, "No." I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's unbiased advice." I have thought about that my entire life since he said that. I realize that if if I go down to the Ford vehicle sales lot and I ask the salesman down there, what do you think could be the best truck for me to buy? Well, what do you expect him to say? Of course he's going to say it's a Ford, because his opinion is very, very biased. He makes a living selling Fords. And this this thing of biased or unbiased advice stretches out into so many different areas of our life that we need to always question who are we getting our advice from and what motivates them. I ask the question every day, what motivates the pure hatred of Donald Trump? What is it? What makes you really hate Donald Trump? My son David, a while ago, was showing me a video of some teacher in a classroom somewhere. One of the students in the classroom was wearing a Great America hat, Donald Trump cap, and the teacher stopped the class. The teacher said, I will not teach in a class where someone is wearing that cap. The statement was, I will take the class and leave the room. Or in other words, she would not stay in the room with a student wearing a red cap that says, Make America Great Again. Why would that teacher be so full of hatred of Donald Trump that she would react that way? What produces that degree of hatred? I thought we was fixing to have a comment there from our.
Oh, well, I was going to say, because we talked a little about this before the show, you and I, and it made me think back to my days. So I went to Temple College back when I was younger, and I graduated around '09. And while I was there, I was part of a philosophy club that we got started. And our sort of sponsor was a great professor I had there named Willis. He was a philosophy professor. People used to ask him if he was a preacher because you could hear him all the way up the hallway. He would just give these sort of sermons about philosophy. It was great. And it's weird to see the college atmosphere now because this was not even a decade ago. And in that class and in that group, you had people from across the political spectrum, philosophical spectrum, and we would talk about things and we would challenge each other, and then we'd have lunch. And I kept thinking back to, we had a debate one day about the use of enhanced interrogation or torture to get information from terror suspects or people on the battlefield. And they asked us to split into two groups, kind of randomly, and debate back and forth. I ended up in the group that our objective, our assignment, was to argue against. And we had to come up with the best argument against that we could. And somehow, I don't know, I'm not the most eloquent person, but I ended up being the sort of leader of that group and having to get into this debate with a soldier who had served in Afghanistan and been wounded. Great guy, and I had to argue with this guy in class. I felt so terrible about it because he'd seen things I can't even imagine, and it got pretty heated. But at the end of it, he and I went to the cafeteria and we had lunch together, and we sat down and we talked about these ideas, and we said to each other, "Hey man, I know you're a good guy. We just we were discussing the topic."
Compare that to Antifa.
Oh, I don't know that you could do that now. I don't know that I'd be able. I don't know that he would have been able to speak like he did at certain campuses.
Well, he would be shouted down by the Antifa type people or the Don Lennons on CNN. So, that's how things are changing, and it's what worries me is when we go from what you described to what I'm seeing happen today. It is very disturbing to me.
I think if you can't at least entertain an opposing thought and follow it to a logical thread and find a way that if you can't take an idea and discard it because the idea is not a solid one, not because you don't feel good about it, I think you've lost something as a person. And I think that's becoming, there's a loud, I want to hope minority, there's a loud minority of people who operate that way, who are the most vocal now, and the ones we're seeing the most on social media and on the news.
So the question I have is, how do you correct this? How do we get back on that track as opposed to the track that we're traveling now? I keep asking the question, this road we're traveling, where does it take us? Where the road that Antifa represents, where does that road lead to?
It's, I mean, I wish I had an answer to get back on track. It's like I said, it's been less than a decade since I was part of that group. It's strange to see that less than 10 years so much has changed. The way that we were able to, we had a professor who encouraged us to argue these ideas and to think outside of ourselves and our little groups, whether, we had people who were pretty left-leaning in class, right-leaning, people who were in the middle, and all of those ideas, everybody was given a moment to speak, given time to express their ideas and accept questions and debate. And I don't know that discussion's being encouraged as much. I think there's a side that's saying, we're correct, come challenge us. And if there is any sort of challenge, it's dismissed as, well, you're not on our wavelength. You don't understand, and so you can't challenge us. So next, bring on the next, because you're not intelligent enough to do this. And
see, in that environment, all of you were courteous enough that you would make a point and then shut your mouth and let that man make a point, or that lady, whoever. And that's what's different today. Watch some of the talk shows on TV. They'll have a conservative and a liberal, and just watch how often the liberal just filibusters. He starts talking, and he's talking fast and loud, and he won't shut up. And you don't have any opportunity to rebut what he just said. And if you ask him a question, he won't answer the question. He just takes off on this progressive left-wing diatribe and he won't shut up. So how do you debate someone like that?
I'm going to take this call for you real quick, and then I'll get back on with you.
Okay. Well, here I done got started on this, but it really does disturb me when I see the dramatic increase in lazy people, inconsiderate people, that kind of thing. I just we've got a caller here that's going to tell us all about how to solve this problem. David, are you there?
I'm there. Good morning, Conn.
Good morning. What do you got on your mind this morning?
Well, I just got in the car, was going somewhere, and I tuned you guys in, and you were just discussing a couple of minutes ago about the hatred and the attacks on Trump. I have some historical perspective on that I'd like to share with you.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Back in 1776, on the 1st of May, Adam Weishaupt created a very wicked conspiratorial organization called the Illuminati. And in 1798, an Englishman wrote a history or an expose of the Illuminati. He was fairly close to the events. And I've read that book twice and have taught a class on the Illuminati. And one of their principal things that they have done ever since that day, same year our independence was declared, but since that date, one of their principal tactics is to put down anybody that opposes their view. And does that sound a little bit familiar with what's happening today?
That's what I was just describing on some of the talk shows, where you're trying to have a debate with a progressive liberal.
Yeah.
They talk longer and louder and faster, and
sure.
you don't get a chance to get a word in edgeways.
They're just following the script. Their script is not to debate or reach any logical conclusions or find truth. Their goal is to puff up their own and put down everybody else. They have no intention, no information to debate honestly with anyone. They're just out to push their own agenda, and that's what they do.
Well, but what is so scary to me is it's working.
Of course it works.
People are accepting that way of life, and like I said about the colleges and universities, they promote that, and they are trying to downplay white males.
Well, but it's just nothing new, Conn. That's the whole point. This isn't just something in the last 10 years in the college campuses. Because the other person there, was that CJ or who's on with you today?
Oh, that's our board operator.
Okay. The board operator was talking about going to TC and having good, honest debates in his classes and having lunch after. And he mentioned something about it's changed in the last 10 years. Well, things do change. The bad guys, the progressives, are getting more bold and more vocal, more better funded. This guy Steyer, I think his name is a billionaire.
Yeah,
and
Tom Steyer.
He funds all this stuff.
Well, but here again, another question that I have: Tom Steyer, George Soros. What motivates them to want to destroy America?
Well,
what's in their head?
That's a question that's asked a lot. First off, I always tell people I am not a mind reader. That's not one of those gifts that God gave to us on this earth. Sometimes He gives us a gift of discernment so we can discern either by conduct, body language, or whatever or something. But I'm not a mind reader, but I do read history, and I do know what these bad guys are doing and how they operate, and I know how they think. Now the question is why? Why do they think that way? I think they think that way because they're under the influence of Satan.
Okay.
That's the only explanation I have.
I could not agree more, David. I've been saying on this radio show ever since I've had this radio show that, folks, there ain't but two sides in this fight. There's God and there's Satan. There's right and there's wrong. There's light and there's dark. There's good and there's evil. But there ain't but two sides. So when are we going to figure out whose side we're on?
You and I have made our choice, and I think Steyer and Soros, those guys, they've made their choice. It's a shame that they probably in their childhood were not exposed to good religious teachings. Adam Weishaupt himself, who formed the Illuminati, he grew to hate the church that was dominant at that time. And in the subsequent evolutions of his organization through the 1800s, I just copied something off the web, a quote, just last week, that the goal of the Carbonari in Italy was to destroy the Catholic Church. They declared war on the Holy See. And there's a guy who wrote about that, I think in England or Scotland, and he was a priest and studied this stuff, this war on the church, and he was asked to write a book or put his thoughts in writing that he'd been lecturing on, and it's a war against God.
Well,
these
it is.
People, they had problems with the Catholic Church, but instead of like Martin Luther trying to reform things, he put his 98 demands on the church door. Instead of trying to reform things, they just seek to destroy. They've lost all hope of fixing things.
Okay, then why in today's Judeo-Christian society called the Republic of the United States of America, why is it that we have the same kind of a thing that we've seen throughout history where evil wants to destroy good? And so many of us stand by idly by and shake our head in agreement with the evil things that are being said. Instead of us standing up and said, not no, but heck no, we're not going to go there. We're going to stand for God. We're going to stand for right. We're going to stand for freedom.
Well, a lot of us are, Conn. That's why you have a radio station, because there's a lot of people tune in, they listen, and we can do something besides just preach to the choir. We can actually get out and get active in things. You do that, and I do that. So there's a lot of people that are waking up in this country, and my job is daily is I find people and I ask them if they have any concern about how the government is treating the U.S. Constitution and how they're ignoring it. When I find people that do express sincere concern, I can see that they're not apathetic and they're not buying into it, and I invite them to come over on our side of the line and get active with us, and that's what each of us has to do every day.
Well, David, I think that is the one thing that each of us can do. I know when I go to fill up my truck with diesel or gas or whatever, I talk to the guy in the pump next door. And
I do the same thing.
You know, now, I might warn folks. I'll say, well, how are you doing today? And he'll say, just fine, how are you doing? Well, when he asks me how I'm doing, boy, he done stepped in a trap. You know. So,
yeah. Well, let me get off, Conn. I've expressed about all I can add to this conversation. But
well,
it's a fight between good and evil, God and Satan, and we need to be strong, and we need to invite other people on our side.
What we do, I guess all I can say is amen to that. Right now, we got to go to a break and try to pay a few bills.
Very good.
Y'all hang in there. We'll be back in just a minute. There's old Bob trying to tell him how to play that fiddle and do that good Texas two-step kind of music. But now we've been talking about good and evil and right and wrong and things like that. And now we got Mark on the telephone, and he's going to elaborate on how we good guys can win. So, Mark, let us have it. What you think?
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing tolerable well. Can't complain.
There you go. Grandpa used to say, I fogged the mirror. Everything's good today.
There you go. There you go.
I guess that kind of makes sense now.
Well,
hey, let's continue on this theme. And the only problem I see with what we have going is our young people, the future of the country, are the ones that we're not getting to, and that's the problem. I've talked to you before. I'm the disabled police officer that spent 10 years my butt in the seat trying to take care of everybody else's problems. And folks don't realize that most officers now are nothing but counselors, because about a third of your calls are, bull crap calls about, my kid won't do what I tell him to do or something like that. We're not really out there doing good police work because we're not allowed to. But the thing I see wrong is people that are, I'll be 59 in February. You're a couple days older than I am. But our crowd, we're set in our ways. We're not going to change our thought patterns. It's going to take a miracle to change some of us. What we got to focus on, Conn, is getting to these kids.
Absolutely. Yes. Amen to that. And that's the theme that I kind of opened with. I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm just saying I see more and more signs of lazy, immoral, impolite, crude, rude behavior on the part of young people. And it's my fault. It's your fault. It's the adults in the room. That's whose fault it is, because we tolerate that.
Yeah, no apology necessary. A conversation is two people talking, not one dominating, so I don't have a problem with people butting in. You know, and I don't know whether you know this or I mentioned it before or not, but I had my own talk show back in the early 90s. And the sad thing that I have to point out is we were talking about the same issues in 91, 92, and 93 when I was on the air that we're talking about today. I don't see a whole bunch of change, and what I do see is for the worse.
Yes.
We have schools teaching our kids to question and challenge any kind of authority, question and challenge anything they don't think might be right. And right is, you know, up to what I want to believe it is today, and, you know, tomorrow may be a different right. And we can't have a society that functions that way. There have to be rules. There has to be an authority, you know, that like everybody says, we're a country of laws based on morals that was, you know, taken from the Bible itself.
But
and
Mark, the respect for law and for rules starts not when you're 25 years old, but when you're about 2 or 3 years old. That's where
Correct.
that respect is put in your brain. That's when you're taught to respect law, rules, boundaries, etc. And that's what I'm not seeing today.
No, the old serpent was pretty smart, Conn. He's got us so dang busy. You know, women have to be equal. They can't stay at home. That's not a job anymore. That's a put down. That's a you put me back in change, you know, kind of mentality. And we have to have 2 careers to meet this lifestyle that we all have to maintain now. So our kids are secondary. They come after work and after my relaxation and after my football and after whatever it is you do, whether you're male or female, mom and pop, you know, mom and dad. And there are so few families. I'm telling you right now, I pulled up to the stoplight just a second ago, and there was a lady and a younger man in the car, and they're both of them sitting there on cell phones, not talking to each other, you know, doing the little thumb thing,
Yeah.
which I refuse to do, by the way. And if I was still an officer on the street, that's one ticket that I'd write every time I stopped somebody that I saw doing that, because we pulled 29 people out of, deceased people out of vehicles, and about half of those were related to distractions in the car, i.e. cell phones. The other half were probably alcohol related. But when you do that for a living over a period of time and you see the cell phone, you know, on and still texting there on the floor, you know what went on. And it's a sad, you know, commentary, and that's part of this whole package.
Well,
So it has to start at home with the parents. These are learned behaviors.
well, you're right, Mark, and that's what my complaint is today. I'm seeing more and more lazy people. I've never seen it like this before. I was in church recently, and there was an empty water bottle laying on the couch in the foyer of the church, and there's a trash can 10 feet away. That people are so lazy they won't take that empty water bottle and put it in the trash can. And I see examples like that every day, and they're increasing. I see people eat a candy bar and they drop the candy bar wrapper wherever they're standing, and they'll drop it 5 feet from a trash can. I just can't imagine this kind of lazy.
Well, and it's permeated the society. I still take it back to, and I'm gonna open up a can of worms here, but we've turned our kindergartens and our preschools and our schools into social platforms for the wrong side, and the parents have turned them over as babysitters.
Well, parents allow it to happen.
Well, we put them in daycare right off the bat, and some daycares are good. I'm not besmirching all daycare. Don't get me wrong, because there are some really good ones out there. But they go from daycare straight into kindergarten. They go from kindergarten straight into whatever it is. They go right into the schools where the very first thing they're being taught is challenge everything. Well, and don't listen to your parents. You don't have to tell them anything, you know, yada, 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 and here we go.
And education is not important. History is not important. The dominating factor is social change.
Correct.
And that's what I think will destroy this society we live in. And back to my previous comments, so whatever happened to the men and the women that would stand up and go to that teacher and say, listen, lady, I don't bring my child up here for you to teach social change. You know, why don't you teach history or teach math or teach my child to add 2 and 2 and come out with 4. But now I guess the child can add 2 and 2 and say it's 16, and if he feels good about it, then I guess that's his answer. You know,
That's absolutely correct.
What are we doing about truth? We're not
Well,
teaching truth anymore. We're teaching political correctness.
Yeah, let me carry it back to the badge real quick. The problem you're not seeing that. Well, let me pose an open question to the whole audience. How many people can tell you right now with a straight face they've attended a school board meeting at going over the curriculum guidelines previous to the school year starting?
Or voted on the school board candidate?
Conn, it goes even deeper than that. Not only did I have a talk show back in the early 90s, I did gun shows. I was representing for the NRA. And I had a sign posted on my table. I had a big teddy bear, about a 3-foot teddy bear, holding my AR with some Velcro straps. It was my assault bear. Of course, I was making fun of the politics at the time. But I had a sign on my table that said, anybody that can show me a current voter registration card, and tell me you voted in the last election cycle, you can have anything I sell or have for half price. I want you to know in 4.5 years of doing gun shows throughout the state of Texas, from McAllen to Tyler to Mesquite to Abilene, I had never had a single person take me up on that offer. And I can tell you for a fact that everybody had a political opinion, but they weren't going to take their due duty and vote.
Well, you know, you're talking about police work and the badge and whatnot, and I'd like to make a comment about that, if I might, Mark.
Go right ahead. Let me finish mine real quick, though. The point I was trying to make is if you go to that school board meeting or you go to that curriculum guide meeting they have before every year at a school board, with curriculum guide, there's a police officer posted there. And if you raise an objection like that and you don't sit down when you're told to sit down and shut up, you will be arrested for disturbing the peace.
Well, see, I see a change in law enforcement as well as I do in schools and education and all kind of areas. Used to, and I have been stopped here recently by a highway patrolman that was very, very cordial, treated me like a human being, not a criminal. I've been stopped by a deputy sheriff not long ago on the loop out here. His name was O'Brien, and maybe I shouldn't mention his name, but he was very courteous. It was at night, and he treated me like I was an average human being, and I really did appreciate that. But I have also seen some policemen that treat you like a criminal. They get out of their car shouting, "Keep your hands on the steering wheel, remain in your vehicle," and they treat you like you're a criminal, pointing a gun at them, and you're just a citizen sitting in your vehicle. So why the change? Why are we getting away from treating people like human beings and treating them like a hardened criminal? And that's kind of got me worried, because you see this growing hatred of policemen. Well, there are some policemen attributing to that. I hope I didn't lose you there.
No, you still got me?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that's a trend that I see spreading, and I really hate to see policemen that think they get up every morning thinking that they either have to kill somebody or that the next bullet is theirs, when that's not really the case. It is a dangerous occupation, but there's a lot of dangerous occupations in this country. That's not the only one. And
well, I can give you 2 reasons, personal experience reasons, for the way police officers are treating citizens now. The first one being, and I went to the academy in Central Texas College, Killeen, Texas, back in '97, and to make a long story short on this one, we had one instructor that flat out told us that everybody out there is guilty of something. It's your job to find it. Now, if you're being taught that in the police academy by your instructor, what kind of attitude are you going to have once you get on the street when you think everybody you're stopping is a criminal? The second thing, and this is no besmirchment upon our men and women under the flag serving in foreign countries, this is my cousin who did 3 official tours as an officer and 4 unofficial as a private contractor. He comes back. He wants to take a job as a cop because he says that and his comment was, there's no different than the Hajis over there and the Hajis here. We get treated like, and BS is the word he used.
Yeah, how would you like to be stopped by him?
Well, that's what I'm saying, and we're bringing them in by the drove, and that attitude is fairly prevalent within. And I'm around officers and military people almost on a daily basis. I'm in a bass club that's all law enforcement. I'm in a bass club here locally that everybody in there except we're all either retired military or first responder law enforcement or active duty military. And that attitude is prevalent without these groups. And there's arguments within those groups about what's going on. But that attitude is very prevalent within, because they get back here and they're not treated, they're treated worse than the average citizen in some cases, like the police officers. And not all police officers are bad either. But I'll tell you one thing, once I became an officer, and I thought the officers wore the white hats, and you know what I mean by that, the the bad guys wore the black hats. And that's not the case.
No.
It's a prevalent. I would say now that I'll be willing to bet 50 to 60% are on the wrong side of that equation. And I didn't mean to dominate this conversation, but
no. I enjoy your conversation because we're talking about the real world, Mark, and that man who was teaching police work at Temple Junior College, he don't live in the same world that I live in or that you live in. I've had different experiences. I was not a sworn officer, but I worked for quite a few years in law enforcement, if you will. As I have a soft spot in my heart for law enforcement officers, but I also have a very grave concern about the growing number of people, as you say, they're being taught, they're being brainwashed that all the citizens are your enemy. So when you see a man get out of his car, undo the strap on his pistol, put his hand on his gun, and he's very anxious to use that gun, there's nothing more dangerous, Mark, than a very scared man with a very loaded gun. That's the most dangerous thing I can think of. So when you instill fear in that man, make him fear everyone he stops, and he's really got a trigger-happy finger on that gun, that is very, very dangerous, and that worries me.
Well, let me add to that for you. The sad thing on that particular development or equation, or however you want to word that, is there are a lot of folks that are putting on the badge because they have what I call the Napoleon syndrome. They may not be small individuals, they may be larger individuals, but they have this attitude that weapon in that badge gives me authority and I can tell you what to do and you can't tell me anything about it. And the number one thing they're being told by other instructors, this was told to us too, the most important thing you'll do when you go on shift is go home tomorrow morning. No, the most important thing we're supposed to do when you put on the badge is protect the citizens that pay your frickin' salary.
Exactly. And I have said to several officers here in the last little while, you were not commissioned as a revenue collector. You were commissioned as a peace officer. You're supposed to keep the peace. And some of these people, they're not keeping the peace, they're destroying the peace. So, don't misunderstand me, Mark, or anybody else. I am not anti-police officer, I am pro-police officer. But as a fellow said to me many, many, many years ago, let's keep this in perspective. You hear so much that they have the most dangerous job in the United States. There was 122 killed in the line of duty last year. 44 were killed feloniously. There was 360 some odd farmers and ranchers killed last year at the same period of time. They were killed doing their job, trying to help the rest of us eat. But how much attention do you see paid to a dead farmer or rancher that was killed doing what he does for a living, as opposed to the attention paid to someone in law enforcement? This is getting kind of out of whack here, Mark, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the other problem that we have, and I'm not either, don't get me wrong, I'm proud. I am absolutely proud and wish I was still on the street. It was a health injury situation that doesn't allow me to still be an officer. This would have been my 20th year, of service. and I would have been, more than happy and proud to keep going even after 20 years. I have a sticker on my vehicle, and I'm proud that I was an officer, and I have some good officer friends. But the mentalities are shifting, and that you got to go home safe tomorrow morning, and your job is to collect revenue is exactly dead on the point, because raises and promotions are based on what they call production, and production is citations, arrests, and convictions in court. So when your basis for being there is me getting a raise and promotion next year at evaluation time, when the eval comes around, then you're going to make arrests, you're going to write everybody a ticket you can, you're going to go to court and try to convict as many people as you can, and sometimes those rules are bent. And that's what really tripped my trigger when I had an individual take evidence out of my evidence locker. He was our evidence officer, as a matter of fact, and it appeared in another case, and I had to tell the DA, see those little initials on the bottom of that piece of evidence? Those are mine. Those were in my evidence locker. They could not have been on the street when that officer says they were. And what are you telling me? And I said, well, I'm telling you they were in my evidence locker, and that's all I can say.
But see, Mark, whatever happened to discretion? Why doesn't a police officer have the discretion to say, that man wasn't wearing a seatbelt, but he's got 3 kids in the back seat of the car, and if I give him a ticket for $300, maybe he can't feed his kids breakfast in the morning. You
have it, you just won't get a raise or promoted.
That's what I'm saying. But because you won't get a raise or promoted, that takes away your discretion to make a common sense decision about what you're doing. And
absolutely correct.
Where's this road take us? Now, the road's taking me to the next commercial break, Mark. So I appreciate your call, Mark. Doggone.
Roger that.
Don't lose the phone number.
Got you, sir.
You be careful out there. And I think we're fixing to go to a break and try to pay a bill or two.